We wanted to find out a bit more about Rembrandt, the man, the artist, and his house, the way he lived, the way he worked.
He moved here when he was 32, 33, 1639 it was. And in that year, you must imagine Rembrandt was at the height of his career. He was young, ambitious. He was together with his wife, Saskia Uilenburg. They were a kind of power couple.
So he was in fashion, he was successful.
Everybody that meant something wanted to have his portrait painted.
So he had commissions flooding in and
yes.
He had money.
Things went well. Yeah.
Right. And then this was, of course, also in a way a shop. So people would come here, look at his paintings, and they also came to buy prints.
Probably in the attic must have been the printing press. He did it himself. There's one pupil that complains a little bit about it, that Rembrandt didn't taught his pupil how to make prints. Paintings sometimes are partly done by pupils, but the prints are always done by Rembrandt himself.
That's fascinating. So it was really a sort of a secret he kept for himself.
It was. What makes these prints so fascinating, I think, is they are visually quite rich and usually they're not finished. And that is something that later artists were attracted by.
So would you say that he went against convention?
He did, very much so. It was a kind of, I think, what we would call an inner drive. That's something unique in 17th century art, at least in Holland, because usually artists work for money. And Rembrandt isn't so much interested in that. He is making art because he thinks this is the way to do it. And this is the best way.
I think that's what makes them, as you say, so timeless and so modern, because I often have a feeling I'm looking over the shoulder of the artist making them. So you really see the process of the making, and I think that is a very almost contemporary approach. We've just been to Amsterdam and to the Rembrandt House, and it really makes a difference to now see the prints again. And we're in the middle of cataloguing the Josefowitz collection, and it is really the largest, most comprehensive, but also most important collection in the sense that it contains extreme rarities, things which haven't been on the market for decades and probably never will again.
Rembrandt started early in his career to worry about prints and printmaking. He started when he was a young student in Leiden, sketching small portraits and self-portraits like this one.
He became one of the most prolific self-portraitists in the history of printmaking, starting with these little sketches, but then moving on to quite representational self-portraits, such as the famous one of himself leaning on a stone sill, and we can see that by now. This is 1639. He has matured, but also he has gained in status, and he's presenting himself here in the manner of a Renaissance painter and artist.
Prints could circulate and reach various cities throughout Europe and make him more famous, even where he would not travel. Because as we know, Rembrandt never left Holland.
Well, let's look perhaps at one of Rembrandt's most famous prints to understand really the skill and the variety of methods and techniques that he brought to printmaking. This is a beautiful impression of the Three Trees, which is probably his most famous landscape. There's a lot going on in the sky. We see heavy rain, we see clouds and storm, and this storm seems to be moving away and the sun is coming through again. Then some areas are very densely worked. There's tone on the paper, which he then wiped in other areas to create highlights, and created a composition that is both impressive from afar, but then when you look more closely, you see tiny little figures. For example, a little figure sitting on a hill, looking in the opposite direction, drawing. So in a way, it is a mini self-portrait. And all these details and the atmosphere that comes with it really make this one of his best loved, most desirable, but also most expensive prints. If we imagine that this is a sheet of paper that is almost 400 years old, to have been preserved in such undamaged condition is also a sign how valuable this must have been from early on and how cherished and treasured Rembrandt's prints were, even in his lifetime and in subsequent centuries. From the 1650s onwards, Rembrandt began to become increasingly radical in his approach to printmaking, and this is an extreme example of this experimental phase. It is the Entombment of Christ.
It is a beautiful print, very dark and very atmospheric, and this darkness is conveyed by the artist through the use of plate tone.
So we can barely see what is happening at first. The eyes need to get used to it as if entering a dark room. And this is really very daring for an artist to create a print that is so dark that large parts of it are literally invisible. Rembrandt as a printmaker is extraordinary not just for the variety of his subjects, of his styles, but also for his deep humanity. He tried to understand the meaning of the scene. There's endless depth, as with any truly great work of art. You never get to the bottom of it.